So let me ask you, if you are faced with an unexpected expense today, a car breakdown, a sudden medical aid bill, or just the rising cost of living, how would you handle it? Would you dip into your savings, take out a loan, or would you find yourself scrambling and wondering how you're going to make ends meet? The truth is, emergencies happen when we least expect them. And as a government employee, you've worked hard for your money. But the question is, are you protecting yourself and your family from the financial stress of life's surprises? Now, this reminds me of Patricia. She is a government employee who had decided to resign, and one of the first things that I discussed with her was setting up an emergency fund. Now, at first, she was extremely hesitant because she wasn't really understanding it and didn't feel it was necessary. But she went ahead with it in any event, and I showed her how to build it step by step. After a few months, Patricia called me and she said, Dhevan, I just want to thank you. Setting up my emergency fund was one of the best things I've ever done. I had an unexpected expense come up, and for the first time, I didn't feel stressed. I knew I had it covered. Now, Patricia's story shows how a solid emergency fund isn't just about financial security, it's about peace of mind. And today, I want to share with you how to set up an emergency fund, why it's so critical, and why I believe that every single government employee should have one. In this video, I'm going to reveal why relying solely on your pension fund or your savings could be risky. I'm also going to share with you how to calculate exactly how much you should keep aside for an emergency fund. And I'm going to share with you a simple, proven strategy to build your fund, even if you're starting from scratch. Now, by the end of this video, you'll have the tools and the knowledge to ensure that when life throws you a curveball, you're not only prepared, but you're also confident. Now, if you are serious about protecting your finances, not just for yourself, but for your family and also for your future, stay with me until the very end. Now, I'm going to start off again by having a look at exactly what is an emergency fund. Now, as I shared with you at the start, is emergencies can come up at any stage. And the problem is when an emergency comes up, if you have your income and it's just enough to cover you for the end of the month, it creates a problem because you're not expecting something to happen. You're not expecting one of your appliances to pack up. You're not expecting that your tire burst and now you've got to change. You're not expecting your car breakdown or any of these things, right? A situation with your family. And because you're not expecting it, there may not be the funds necessary for it. So we want to create what's called an emergency fund. All that this is, one word, is just basically savings. It's a special type of savings though, and I'll guide you on how to set this up, right? Because we want to create this for the emergencies. Now, emergencies again can come up at any stage, but let's take a closer look at why I was sharing with you earlier an emergency fund becomes critical for government employees. If you have a look at your journey, there are one or two routes that you can take. Eventually, you're going to reach a stage where you might want to retire, in which case you would be able to access your gratuity and you would be able to access your income. But there might be a delay with the payout, right? From the time that you actually exit to the time that you actually receive your money, there might be some delays. Or there might be a delay in terms of the processing of your paperwork. In which case it creates a problem for you because how do you manage your expenses? That's from a retirement perspective. If you are aiming at resigning, we have to factor the same because there may also be a delay. There might be a delay here because the time it takes to process within the fund itself, right, of your payout. There might be a delay when it comes to you doing certain types of tax calculations, right? Especially if you're working with me, I want to make sure that we are keeping the tax to the absolute bare minimum and you maximize your savings, right? In which case it does take a little extra time. So there might be some unnecessary delays. In any event, whether you're choosing to retire or resign, the processing of your funds might take longer than what you'd expected. And having access to some type of savings that you can piggyback on becomes essential in order to ensure that you have peace of mind and you're not scrambling around looking for money, right? The last thing that you want to do is get yourself into some type of debt. It's the last thing, right? Or where you're going to have to borrow these funds from a family member or a friend. It's just not the way that you want to start up your retirement or your resignation process, right? Then I want to talk about how much should you have or how much should you save inside of the emergency fund. Now, when we're setting up something like this, rule of thumb, we use between 3 to 6 months of your earnings, right? Now I want to simplify it. I'm going to use some examples here as well, just to make the math look a bit easy for you. So say in my example, I'm going to call out your expenses in the example. Say your expenses for the month work out to 15,000. I'm just using a round figure, right? Just to make our math look a bit easy. So 15,000 is your monthly expenses. It means if we are planning to cater for 3 months of expenses, we are then going to take 15,000 times 3, and that's 45,000. So then you would keep 45,000 aside. That becomes your emergency fund. So touch wood, situation comes up, you need access to some funds, you know you have 45,000 that is available for you inside of this emergency fund, right? Making sense? It's the first way of doing this. Second thing that you can do is now, as I said, it's a range, right? From 3 months to 6 months. So your alternative here is you might do a 6 month. In which case, we're now going to take 15,000 over 6 months. And here, my answer is 90,000. So then you have 6 months of income that is getting saved. Now, if you look from a sliding scale perspective, I'm basically sharing with you that it must be anywhere between 45,000 in this example to 90,000. Anywhere inside of that range. Now, you might decide that you want to adjust it slightly. You don't really want to do 45,000. Maybe you want to do a round figure of 50,000. That's okay. It's perfectly fine. Or you might decide, okay, you want to go with 60,000. Or you might do a figure of 75,000. See, it doesn't really matter. The goal behind the exercise is I want you to get used to the idea of keeping money aside that you know is for emergencies that you're not touching, right? It's not money that you're going to use for your groceries. It's not money that you're going to use for paying bills, because it's money that you're just setting aside for when an emergency comes up, right? Groceries shouldn't be an emergency, okay? Paying your bills is not an emergency. It's an actual emergency that comes up. Right? So keep that in mind. Now, next up is, where should you save this money? And this, I believe, is something quite important, because I have seen members making mistakes with this. Setting up emergency funds in the wrong place is resulting in extra tax or not getting access to liquid cash. So when we talk about where you should be saving your money, keep in mind that the focus behind this is liquidity. Right? And liquidity means easy access. So wherever you are saving this money, you're saving it for that purpose. You're not aiming at getting the highest interest from this. It's not the goal, right? It's not the goal for this. You're not aiming at maximizing returns. Not what we're looking to do. The goal here is simple. We want quick access to money, because you never know when an emergency might arise, right? If an emergency comes up, you need to have access to the money quickly, isn't it? So because you're focusing here on quick access, you want to look at where can you save this money that you can access it as quickly as possible. Let's look at some options, right? One option might be a bank investment, which is great. And inside of a bank product, you could put money inside a savings account. That's good, isn't it? Because you have quick access to the money. If you're not using it, it's burning in some interest. So it's one option. You also have fixed deposits. And inside of a fixed deposit, there might be different terms, right? Maybe you have 32 days, you might have 6 months, 1 year, up to 5 years, right? There's different inside. Now you wouldn't, please make sure that you don't do this, okay? Comment below, tell me that you promise. Say, I promise in the comment below. You're not gonna do a fixed deposit for 1 year in an emergency fund, because the goal is liquidity, which is easy access. And inside of a fixed deposit, you're not going to be able to get the easy access. So keep that in mind. We're not aiming for that length of time, right? Let's go look at some of the insurance company products. So you could invest money. And here, when you invest, you could use a unit trust investment. Again, if you're using a unit trust investment, you want to look at where exactly is the money invested, right? Is the money exposed to the markets? Because if the markets dip, and you save some money, then you're not going to have what's there, which is going to create a problem if an emergency had to arise. So These are all the factors that you want to consider. Then you also have an endowment. Now, please comment below. Tell me, I promise, that you're not going to set up an emergency fund in an endowment. Why? Because an endowment plan is designed with a 5-year term. Right? It's got a 5-year term inside of it. So it's not really designed for somebody who wants access to money in a short space of time. You agree? 5 years is a relatively long time. So you don't want to save money into something like that. So where you should be saving, you want to give thought to this. The goal here is easy access. You're saving in a place where if an emergency comes up today, you can access that money immediately. You don't have to put a notice for it. You don't have to fill in lots of forms, wait for the insurance companies to price before they pay you out. You just want to be able to access the money immediately. Sounds good? Good. And then I want you to be aware from a tax perspective. Now keep in mind that you don't want to keep too much of money in an emergency fund, because if you have your money in a place and you are earning some type of interest, that interest will be regarded as income. And that income will be added onto your salary. And when SARS does that, it could mean that you end up paying more in tax. So you want to be extremely mindful of this, because you definitely don't want to have, you don't want to have an emergency fund that is sitting too high where the interest now throws you up into the next tax bracket. That means you're going to end up paying more in taxes. Again, we're defeating the purpose, right? Or we're not saving the money in the best possible place, right? It needs some type of split. So you want to keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that from an emergency perspective or from a tax perspective, you could also attract a state duty on money that you are keeping into places that have easy access of funds, right? So you might have to pay attention to that. You also want to pay attention to executive fees. It's a fee that is paid on death. So the executive is responsible for winding your estate, and usually emergency funds would attract the executive fees, right? So you want to keep in mind various elements. Now, I hope the video has been helpful to you. Comment below with the items that we discussed today. Is it making sense? Can you understand why I'm sharing with you to say that an emergency fund becomes essential, right? You never know what could take place at the time that you're deciding to retire or resign. You want to have the peace of mind that you have access to that money. And imagine how comfortable you would feel knowing that if something takes place, you do have access to 3 months income. You do have access to 6 months income. Now, if you've not already done so, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you're able to gain access to these videos as soon as we put them out. And I will catch you in the next video.